They said the royal halls of Windsor had seen every kind of silence, but not this one. Not the kind that followed when a single royal guard dared to defy a queen. It began with a medal, a small silver circle that once rested under glass, untouched since the days of Queen Elizabeth II. A token of courage given after 9/11, never worn, never spoken of. Until one morning, Queen Camilla took it and pinned it to her ex-husband's chest. What happened next would freeze the palace in stunned disbelief, as a guard who'd sworn never to speak out finally broke royal protocol for the sake of the late Queen's honor. Before we uncover the truth behind this emotional royal standoff, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story that reveals the human heart behind royal walls. Share it with someone who still believes loyalty isn't outdated, because this isn't just royal drama. It's a story about respect, memory, and the courage to speak when silence feels safer. Windsor Castle had always known silence. Not the hollow kind that comes from emptiness, but the kind that carries weight. It was the sound of discipline, of footsteps measured to the rhythm of duty, of servants who spoke softly out of respect for ghosts still walking those polished floors. That morning, though, the silence was different. It wasn't respectful, it was alert. Sergeant Edric Vaughn, one of the longest-serving royal guards, stood in the blue drawing room, clipboard tucked neatly under one arm. The soft winter sunlight spilled through tall, mullioned windows, landing on something that didn't belong, an empty velvet pad beneath a glass case. The medal was gone. Not just any medal. The medal, the U.S. Honor Medal presented to the late Queen Elizabeth II after 9/11, a private gift from the American president, quietly accepted, never shown, never worn. It had sat in that case for over a year, untouched, until now. Edric didn't gasp, he didn't frown, he didn't move much at all. But if you watched closely, you'd see it. The slightest pause in the motion of his gloved hand tracing the brass edge of the case. For a man trained to stand still for hours in any storm, that pause was an earthquake. He scanned the inventory tag. Still sealed. No removal order. No clearance. Then came a voice, nervous and young. "Sir, I think Her Majesty requested it this morning. Something about a presentation?" Edric turned his head just slightly, the kind of movement that could slice through air. "Which Her Majesty?" he asked. "The Queen Consort, sir. The East Parlor, private tea."
He didn't reply, just nodded once and walked away, his footsteps silent, deliberate, tight with control. The East Wing of Windsor always felt warmer, more personal, the place for quiet teas, not ceremonies. As he passed through its corridors, Edric could feel the shift in atmosphere. Staff voices dropped when he appeared. The kind of hush that wasn't just about rank, it was unease. He stopped at a security terminal and scanned the morning surveillance log. 10:02 a.m., 2 footmen entering the East Parlor carrying a long velvet case. 10:48 a.m., they exited empty-handed, and through a narrow gap in the door, one frame froze everything. A flash of silver on a lapel. Andrew Parker Bowles, Camilla's ex-husband, seated beside her, wearing the late Queen's medal. Edric stared at the screen, unblinking. Then, quietly, "It wasn't yours to bestow." He encrypted the footage, sent it to a secure archive, then turned and found one of the footmen, a young man named Gareth, pale-faced and fidgeting with linen. "Tell me what you saw." Edric said. "Nothing, sir. We just delivered the case. Her Majesty asked him to open it, said it would mean more if he took it out himself." Edric's gaze hardened. "Like it was his?" The young man nodded. "Yes, sir." That was all he needed. In the world of royalty, medals aren't just metal. They're memory. They hold the weight of the moment they were earned and the people who stood behind them. For the late Queen, that medal had meant something unspoken. It was given quietly in Washington during a state visit where no cameras were allowed. It wasn't a reward for politics or pomp. It was a symbol of solidarity, a silent salute between nations during a time of grief and resolve. Edric remembered that day clearly. Rain on the castle's northern windows. The Queen sitting with a small velvet box by her teacup. She had opened it, looked at him with calm pride, and said only, "They gave it for duty, not for display." And then she had closed the box, as though the act of showing it had been enough. Now, that same medal had been taken, removed without order, pinned, for sentiment, on the chest of a man who had once walked away from a queen herself. Edric made his way to the archives. The air there always felt colder, preserved, precise. Each drawer logged, sealed, indexed by time and purpose. Drawer number 3, blue drawing room memorabilia. He pulled the file. Last recorded movement, none. The medal was still listed as stationery, not for handling. He closed the drawer, slowly, because this wasn't about procedure anymore. This was about desecration. When you serve long enough in those walls, you learn something. The Queen's memory wasn't protected by headlines or public adoration. It was protected by quiet people who never broke their post. People like Edric. By late morning, whispers had started to spread. No official statement. There never is, not at first. Just a change in tone between staff, the stiffer greetings, the way everyone avoided the East parlor. Somewhere, someone had told the story already, not to gossip, but because the palace itself seemed to feel what had gone wrong. Edric walked back through the blue drawing room, where preparations were already underway for a small reception. Polish, flowers, silver trays, everything gleamed. But the display case was still open. The velvet pad still bare. On the nearby table lay a draft press release, half-written, a symbolic gesture. Queen Camilla honors longtime military service of Andrew Parker Bowles. No mention of the late Queen. No mention of the medal's origin. Just a photo placeholder where the medal, her medal, should have stayed behind glass. Edric reached out and closed the empty box. The soft click echoed through the room like a closing prayer. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. But everyone who saw him in that moment understood. Something had broken in the royal house that morning. Something you couldn't patch with a press release or palace polish. It wasn't just a missing medal. It was a first crack in the crown's reflection, and the first time in decades that someone inside those walls would dare to say it out loud. The blue drawing room had always been the heart of Windsor's elegance. Sunlight glinting off chandeliers, staff gliding like clockwork through centuries of ritual. But that morning, the air was heavy, not from heat or incense, but from knowing something sacred had been touched. And Sergeant Edric Vaughn was about to do what no royal guard ever dreamed of doing, speak. Camilla entered mid-conversation, trailed by aides and a press planner. Her cream coat caught the light like parchment, her voice clipped, measured. "Make sure the photographer stands by the eastern alcove. No harsh light, please." It was ordinary palace chatter, optics, angles, appearances. But not to Edric. He wasn't hearing words. He was hearing the echo of a promise being erased. He stepped forward, boots silent on the carpet. He said, calm, level, but sharp enough to stop a sentence in midair. Camilla toned. "Sergeant Vaughn." "Yes. May I confirm the medal's current custody?" For a moment, no one spoke. You could almost hear the pause stretch like thin glass. "The medal?" Camilla asked lightly. "You mean that old American thing?" Edric didn't blink. The U.S. honor medal that belonged to Her Majesty, the Queen. It was removed from display this morning. I'd like to confirm its chain of custody. A flicker crossed her eyes, surprise, irritation, perhaps both. "Oh, yes," she said, waving one gloved hand. "That piece. I had it retrieved. Andrew served in uniform once. You know, cavalry, decades ago. I thought it fitting to honor his service. Sentiment suits him." The room tightened. No one dared move, not even to breathe too loudly. Edric's voice was steady. "It wasn't yours to bestow." 6 words, soft, but sharper than a sword. A murmur rippled through the aides. Camilla's smile didn't fade, but it froze, the way porcelain cracks without shattering. "You're addressing the Queen Consort," she said, her tone turning lower. "And I'm addressing an act that erased haze," Edric replied. Every head turned. The florist's hands froze mid-arrangement. One aide lowered their phone. No one had ever heard a guardsman speak to royalty like this, not in public, Not in private. Not ever. Camilla's jaw tightened. I understand the affection you soldiers have for these trinkets, she said carefully, but it was hardly a public artifact. No one even knew what it was. I saw it as something that deserved closure. Closure, Edric repeated, his voice calm but heavier now. That medal was given across oceans, a symbol of unity, of duty. It was never for display, and never for inheritance. It was meant to stand. Camilla exhaled through her nose, a soft sigh sharpened by condescension. You soldiers cling to symbols. You forget that legacy must evolve. Something in Edric's eyes shifted, a fire he'd buried for years. He spoke quietly, but every syllable carried weight. Legacy doesn't evolve through convenience. It endures through honor. No one moved. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock seemed to stop, as if the castle itself was listening. Camilla's lips parted, ready to end it. I think this conversation is finished, she said, turning slightly. But Edric didn't move. It should never have started. It was calm defiance, the kind that didn't need volume to carry force. Every aide felt it. This wasn't insolence. This was heartbreak wearing a uniform. Camilla straightened, tone icy. You do well to remember your place, Sergeant. Edric didn't flinch. I haven't forgotten it, he said. I've been standing in it all morning. That was the moment the air broke, not from shouting, but from shock, because what he said wasn't rebellion. It was remembrance. For a second, Camilla faltered. Her hand tightened on her clutch, and then she tried to recover with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was just a medal, she said softly. She never wore it, never spoke of it. If it meant something, she had a lifetime to show it. That was when Edric snapped, not in rage, but in conviction. That medal, he said, voice rising like distant thunder, was earned by every family who stood behind her when this country stood alone. It wasn't for display, and it wasn't for favor. It was for duty. He took a step forward, slow, controlled, unafraid. She never wore it because she didn't need to. When Parliament hesitated, when the world looked uncertain, she stood. She stood, and now you pinned her silence onto the chest of a man who abandoned her, without permission, without clearance, without shame. A stylus clattered to the floor. No one bent to pick it up. Camilla's voice trembled, part fury, part disbelief. You forget yourself. No, Edric said, steady, unwavering. I remember her. The room fell completely silent. It wasn't the silence of respect anymore. It was a silence of realization. Every aide, every servant, every planner knew. This was a moment the palace walls heard truth echo louder than protocol. Camilla's heels clicked on the marble as she stepped closer. You are a guardsman. You do not question private affairs between family. Edric didn't retreat. I protect the memory of the sovereign, he said. That doesn't end when the crown passes. He gestured lightly toward the empty case. That isn't a trinket. It's a promise between nations. You don't reassign promises over tea. No one dared breathe. A young aide's tablet dimmed and went black. A housekeeper paused mid-step, holding linens like an offering, staring. She'd worked there 20 years, and she would never forget this moment. For the first time, someone in uniform had spoken not to the crown, but for it, and then a door creaked. Every head turned. No announcement, no fanfare, just heavy, measured footsteps entering the room. Camilla's face stiffened, her posture straightening automatically. The aides froze. The temperature dropped, because King Charles had entered. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Where's the medal? He asked quietly. Camilla opened her mouth. It was... I wasn't asking you, he said. And for the first time all morning, she fell silent. The king turned to Edric. Sergeant. Edric drew a breath. It was removed, sir. Presented privately, without clearance. Charles nodded once. Slowly. I see. And then the silence deepened, the kind that comes before judgment. For a long moment, the only sound in the blue drawing room was breathing, the kind that came from restraint, shallow, measured, afraid to disturb what was unfolding. King Charles stood just inside the doorway. Not moving, not speaking, just looking. His eyes passed from Camilla, still standing near the center of the room, to Sergeant Edric Vaughn, unflinching by the door, and finally to the empty glass case, the ghostly imprint of the missing medal still visible on its velvet pad. The king's expression was unreadable, but everyone in that room knew. When a monarch goes silent, the ground beneath you shifts. Finally, his voice came, low, controlled. "Someone tell me," he said, "why a foreign medal gifted to the late Queen and never authorized for release is no longer where she left it." Camilla swallowed. Her tone was light, too light. "It was a personal gesture," she said. "He wore uniform once. I thought it would mean something to him." Charles turned his head, not sharply, but with a slowness that felt heavier than anger. "It would mean something to him," he repeated. The words hung in the air. Then he looked down at the empty case, the closed velvet box, and he said, almost to himself, "It's always the small gestures that undo the biggest things." Camilla shifted her weight, voice brittle. It was not meant for controversy. He faced her fully now. "It was meant for her," he said. The sentence landed like a gavel. No volume, no fury, just finality. He turned back to Edric. "Sergeant Vaughn," he said quietly, "in your assessment, where should it be?" Edric didn't hesitate. "Under glass, sir, where she left it." Charles gave a single nod. "Then return it." No shouting, no ceremony, just command. An aide moved immediately, phone in hand, sending a secure message. Another retrieved gloves and an archival seal. The quiet efficiency of guilt in motion. Camilla stood frozen, her expression no longer composed, just tired. She knew this wasn't about the medal anymore. It was about memory, and Hayes wasn't the one being honored. Charles drew a deep breath, one that steadied rather than swelled. He looked at the box, his voice softer now. "She never accepted that medal publicly," he said, almost reflective. "Not because it lacked value, but because she knew its value didn't belong to her alone. It was never meant to be seen, only kept." He looked up, not at Camilla, but at everyone else. "I will not have it turned into theater," he said, "and I will not have it used to decorate personal history." Camilla's voice came barely above a whisper. "You're making this into a scandal." Charles turned, met her eyes. "No," he said, "you did that. I'm ending it." And then, to Edric, with a quiet note of respect, "Thank you, Sergeant. You remembered her." Edric gave a small, crisp nod. "Always, sir." The king turned to go. No dramatic exit. No curt orders. Just the calm presence a man raised in the shadow of duty, walking out as if to close a chapter with his own steps. Behind him, aid scattered like wind. The box was retrieved, secured, and by late afternoon, the medal was back in the blue drawing room. No photographers, no press, no mention in the court circular. Just silence, the kind the late Queen herself might have approved of. A plain-clothed liaison carried the medal in velvet case gloved and sealed. Sergeant Edric Vaughn received it wordlessly. He walked it back to its glass case, past servants who paused mid-task, eyes following him not out of curiosity, but reverence. When he placed it back on the velvet pad, the air seemed to exhale, like the castle itself recognized something being restored. He latched the glass shut, then reached for the new placard waiting in a white archival envelope. The engraving read, "Personal bequest of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, not for transfer or display. Maintained in situ by private order, 2023. He slid it gently into place. Done. Behind him, footsteps approached, quiet, deliberate. Edric turned. King Charles had returned, alone. No aides, no cameras. He stood beside the case, hands folded behind his back. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at the medal, at its reflection, at the faint ghost of the woman whose legacy lingered in every corner of that room. Then, softly, he said, "There are things I will never live up to." Edric didn't answer. Didn't need to. Charles nodded, faintly, a private salute of sorts. "Good man," he murmured, before walking out once more. The door closed quietly behind him. No applause, No witnesses, just a medal, gleaming under glass, as it always had, untouched, unseen, but never forgotten. That evening, the palace photographers reviewed the morning's unreleased images. One photo caught their attention. Andrew Parker Bowles, smiling beside Camilla, the Queen's medal pinned to his chest. It hadn't been published, but it existed, and someone asked a question no one wanted to voice aloud. Wasn't that the Queen's? By nightfall, the image was withdrawn. No explanation, just silence. The kind of silence that says, "We fixed it, let it rest." The next morning, several aides were quietly reassigned. The East Parlor went unused for days, and Camilla, though still the Queen Consort, never again stepped foot in the blue drawing room. Not once. From that day forward, whenever she passed it, she'd glance away, because the glass case inside that room didn't just hold a medal anymore. It held a reminder that symbols don't fade unless someone lets them. And one man hadn't. So, what do you think? Was Sergeant Vaughn right to speak, even when silence was safer? Would you have done the same, if it meant defending the memory of someone who embodied duty itself? Because sometimes, the loudest act of loyalty is spoken in a whisper,